everyone, and welcome. This is episode 307 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I'm James, joined by Ryan and Paul. I'm not even going to ask how we feel about the Packers. They're trash. We'll skip that talk on for our usual Sunday night
tank time. Everybody,
banter. Yeah,
embrace
no. Drake May all the way.
Yep.
That's kind of where we're sitting. Or they just need a lot. And I'm sure you'll talk about that on reporting as eligible, Paul. But
Indeed,
look, man, every time you think it can't get worse, it just always does. I don't know. It baffles me, but
it's rough. It's brutal.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. At least the start of the World Series has been fun. You know, first couple of games. I don't know how much of that you guys caught over the weekend. I caught a good part of the Friday night game one, which was probably one of the better World Series games in recent memory, just in terms of, high drama, walk-off home runs, game-tying home runs. Corey Seager smoking that game-tying home run in the ninth inning and knowing he got it right away was amazing.
The reaction to that's so good.
That was great. And then, of course, the Diamondbacks just romp in game two. So, it gives me some kind of mixed feelings, just still wondering what could have been for the Brewers had they not tanked those two games against Arizona. I don't know. Either of you guys have those feelings at all still watching the D-backs on this run?
I mean, I'm just enjoying it. It's funny.
Sure.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
And it's great that this just keeps happening because I don't know, like if you're gonna lose in the postseason, you might as well lose to the team that either wins it all or gets close to it. You might as well. Like at least you can't say, well, we didn't run into like a hot team or whatever. Like you got the team that got hot.
It's true.
So that part of it was kind of interesting. We had it on. So we were in lacrosse this weekend. Amy and I were for her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. We threw them a party. And so at one of the tables, I pulled out my iPad and stuck on the game, and that started to attract a huddle of people over to the table. So we were all kind of huddled around. My mom was sitting there on her phone and watching the Badger women's volleyball game. So we had like two different sets of things going there. But yeah, it was good to see Amy's parents' 50th wedding anniversary. It's still a couple of weeks away, but we had the party this weekend because that's what work time wise. So. But yeah, on the way home today we watched the first half of the Packers game while we were having lunch. And my plan was to stay in lacrosse and watch the second half and then drive home. And at halftime, I'm just like, screw it. Let's just go.
Good. Yeah.
Let's go. Didn't even listen to another radio on the way home. Put on music instead. Just got straight out of town. So, yeah.
No, I was in that neck of the woods too this weekend. My sister got married. So that was fun seeing the whole family. I was in the wedding party. My other sister was maid of honor. It was great. But the wedding was Saturday night, and this was obviously scheduled before we knew the Badgers were hosting Ohio State in a night game, and there were no TVs in the venue, which also probably for the best as well, because that one didn't seem pleasant either. But I had a bunch of friends come up to Madison for the game and were wanting to see me, and I was like, any other weekend I'd make it work, but not gonna miss my sister's wedding. So, but busy weekend, I guess, for all of us, and still lots to talk about in terms of the Brewers specifically. Craig Counsell watch, coming down to the last few days here, but we'll get into that in a minute. First, a reminder, as always, you can become a patron at patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month gets you question priority both on this pod and on reporting as eligible. So you can ask Paul in 20 different ways what the hell is wrong with the Packers. $2 a month is there. $5 you get the extra content. Paul's reporting as eligible mini pods previewing the game each week, as well as the minor league extra with Ryan and James Anderson. Even if you're not a patron, as always, support us another way. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this right now. Leave a 5-star review, thumbs up, recommend it, click that follow button, whatever you got to do to make sure you don't miss an episode. We greatly appreciate that as well. All right. With all that said, as I mentioned, we're down to the last couple of days of Craig Counsell officially being under contract with the Milwaukee Brewers. But the Brewers kind of made the decision to grant interviews with the Mets and the Guardians early before that contract expired. So I know there was some talk, you could kind of read it into this two different ways, right? Whether it's a show of good faith, like, hey, Craig, we owe it to you to check out the market, get a head start, and know that we're always here waiting and want you back if that isn't to your liking. Or, maybe it could be an acknowledgement that they know he's headed elsewhere and are just kind of doing him the courtesy of getting started that way. So I guess, Paul, which one of those do we think it is?
I'm coming back around a little bit to maybe this is just a market play, and this is a show of. First of all, I do think it's a show of good faith that whatever happens, Counsell has done his time here, and we're not going to screw you over. Go figure out what you're worth. Like, that's definitely happening one way or another. Like, there's not really any ambiguity there. It's actually a little surprising given what happened with Stearns and how they kept him on lockdown for as long as they possibly could. And I'm coming back around a little bit to maybe this is just Craig wanting to get what he can get max value wise and still stick around, but I still lean a little bit towards him taking on something new. So I'm still leaning that way, but I've heard enough rumblings out there amongst various people that I talk to that he may actually be up for coming back. So I'm holding out some hope, but I would still place money on him going off. But this is what the Brewers should do all the time with people who may be leaving. Like, transparency is a much better thing to do than being jerks about your contract, and that makes people want to come here less. So whatever, I hope Counsell gets what he wants wherever that is. I hope he does come back because he's awesome, and I hope the Brewers aren't cheap with him, because being cheap with your manager is dumb. It's an easy place to get cheap wins, but I'd still partially, I think, hedge on him being out of town.
Yeah, so exactly what that is, there's an Adam Post question here coming up in a minute. But so the thing that struck me about this was when the initial report came out, they said the Brewers had been leaning towards making him wait. And when I saw that, I said, well, okay, so that means he's going, right? If they're just doing that, right, then that would definitely indicate that they think he's just gone and they're just doing this out of spite or something. Like the way the Stearns thing seemed to kind of play out. So that kind of took me in one direction, but the more I think about it and the more that we do hear other stuff, James, you had the link to that guy from Cleveland who seemed to indicate that, like, he seemed to have talked to people in the game that thought he was headed back to Milwaukee. So
right.
There was that thing. So like, I don't get the sense that out there's not we've been saying this for weeks now. We never got the sense that, like, this was a done deal the way that David Stearns was a done deal for the last few years.
Yeah.
To be going to the Mets. It never got anywhere near that point where it was like, yeah, this is a fait accompli. We're just waiting to get to the end. But that bit about them potentially waiting to the very bitter end was very strange, and I don't know if that's just trying to make some point or who knows, but it's stupid. The other interesting thing that came up in that article was apparently Terry Francona was leading the majors at 4.5. I thought we all had the number at closer to like 6.5.
But I think that may have been incorrect. As I noted to you guys, this columnist kind of seemed to be iffy on some facts. Like, he even misspelled John Heyman's name, but it was in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. So who knows? Kind of a mixed bag there. So I'm going to choose to believe that he was correct and that his source said that everyone seems to think Counsell's headed back. But, it's definitely grain of salt season. So
yeah, but
I don't know here.
That would indicate, like, if it really is that Francona was like one of the leading managers in baseball making like 4.5 and Craig was already at 3.5, we're really not talking about a lot of money here. I mean, maybe the Mets go out and they say, hey, we're going to give you 7, we're going to give you 8. I still don't think that that's like impossible or even like much of a stretch for the Brewers to just say, okay, we'll match. Like, we'll match what the Mets are willing to give you. Like, that's, I still think that that's well within the realm of possibility. We talked about it last week. Like, this is, it's not like middle reliever money, but it's like fifth starter money. It's Wade Miley money, right? Like, it's right. You're not talking about like a huge chunk of change here. So Yeah, I think that it still remains quite a possibility. It really does just come down to like what he wants to do. I think more than anything, this is just about like where does he want to go? What does he want to do? Does he want to go to the Mets and have an owner who is spending presumably either the most money or one of the most amounts of money in the sport, and working with David Stearns, who he had a working relationship with here in Milwaukee?
Yep.
If that's what he wants to do, I mean, those aren't things the Brewers can offer at this point, right? Like that's not something they can like say. They can't give him David Stearns because David Stearns is gone, and the Brewers are never going to spend like the Mets are capable of spending under Steve Cohen. That's not ever going to happen. So if that's what he wants, then yeah, I mean, he should go. Like that's the thing. But I get the sense, I always get the sense that would be. It's unfathomable to me that he would leave. It seems so far fetched.
Yeah.
Even now.
Well, the Brewers are part of him, you know, since he was a little kid.
I do think maybe that factors in too about the leeway that they're giving him, or the opportunity to go and see what else is out there, and potentially just leave the door open for the future. This is very unlike any other or many other manager uncouplings, right? Where you could still see a future where, okay, maybe the Mets thing doesn't work out, or in 5 to 10 years, some other way he could be back with the Brewers in some capacity. I think they're doing everything they can to at least kind of make this as amicable as possible. All right, let's move on. You mentioned Adam Post's question here, so let's get to that right away on Patreon. Adam's asking, please rank the following 2024 season scenarios from most likely to least likely.
Yeah.
We've got Craig Counsell manages the Brewers. Craig Counsell manages the Mets. Craig Counsell manages a team other than the Brewers or Mets, or Craig Counsell doesn't manage any team. Paul, we've had some variation of this over the last few weeks.
Sure have.
I guess, where do you sit right now?
Oh, I think I've changed a little bit on this. So I will go Mets just by a hair. I still think it's more likely than not, followed by the Brewers. I do think there's still a good chance he comes back. Then doesn't manage any team, and then a different team. I think that's the least likely. I think the two teams that he's likely to manage are those two. And failing that, I think time off is the next most likely. But I think it'll come down to Brewers and Mets ultimately.
Yeah, I think those two are clearly ahead of these other options. I'll go with the order that he has it, though. I'll say Brewers. I've been saying all along, Brewers, then the Mets. I think then the biggest gap, and then I'll say managing a team other than the Brewers or the Mets, and then not managing at all. I think he does manage. I think that is one thing we have gotten pretty clear indication on, is that he does seem likely to manage. So I think, yeah, if it's not one of those two teams, maybe it is the Guardians. Maybe he does decide to go there, though. That is such a weird fit because, the Brewers are like the Guardians, but spendier. I don't know. It's does he really want to go to Cleveland where they're going to be even less spendy than the Brewers are? That's just kind of.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, it would be a strange fit. You already have that here. You already have almost everything the same, except it's where you grew up, and they're spending more money already. So that one would baffle me. I wouldn't get that one.
At least it's not Detroit. All right. Yeah. M. Santana's got our next question here. Thank you, Paul. M. Santana asking, assuming Counsell is not coaching the Brewers next season, do y'all have a wish list or predictions for who the Brewers might go for at manager? And then we got a comment on Twitter from Jade bringing up a couple of names, including some former Brewers like Gabe Kapler still out there, or Stephen Vogt getting some early play as a managerial candidate. So I guess, Paul, any names at the top of your mind if Counsell does move on?
Not really. I want somebody I've never heard of, preferably. I think that's usually if I've heard it, honestly, I only hear about managers if they're bad or they're the one that runs my team. I don't like Gabe Kapler. I don't think he does a very good job. And he has history with the team, but it's not actually. I will try to not be libelous here. It's not great history with the team. No. So, and that's all ancient history at this point. But still, I don't need that. And Gabe Kapler is mainly, I think, famous for being a workout warrior. Not a guy who's not that you can't be good at that and also a good manager, but I don't know. It's always seemed kind of weird to me, and I don't know if Vogt's good either. I'm kind of down on I feel like we have David Ross at home. That's kind of that kind of like I don't want to copy that either. Maybe that's not what that would be, but I want to get with Counsell's exact profile. I don't know if it exists. That might be somebody that comes out of the front office that was a former player that I don't know about, but I just don't want to retread. Just give me somebody who's more along the lines of what we already have and not just a player. Like players are good at relating to players. That's fine, but I want somebody who is in touch with advanced concepts that come out of the front office. And not shy about putting your bullpen in their place once in a while, which I think is one of Counsell's greatest strengths. That's hard to do, and guys that I've heard of, I've seen no evidence will be good at any of that, so I'm out on guys like Kapler and Vogt.
Yeah, so I'm going to differentiate between the two a little bit here. So Kapler, we know, has had reported issues getting along with players.
Yes, he has.
So that is something that we know that that's out there in the ether. In fact, it is believed the reason he was let go in San Francisco, the front office and him got along great. He speaks the front office language, and he actually did interview for the Boston Red Sox. What are we calling it on Effectively Wild these now? The Pobo. He interviewed for that job with the Red Sox. So to move back to the front office, which is where he came from, and probably a better fit for what he is and what he does, given these apparent issues he's had relating to players both in Philadelphia and San Francisco. So yeah, I don't think I want any part of that. That would be, potentially a bad fit, because when we talked either last week or whenever we talked about this, one of the first things we said is we want somebody who's going to be good at relating with the players, and there seems to be evidence that Kapler is not.
Yep.
And it is a noted strength of Craig Counsell, Colton Wong, among others, saying they'd run through a wall for him. Like, it's a notable strength of what Craig Counsell does. So there's that. The Vogt thing is a little bit different and a little bit interesting. From what I can tell, I was just looking at it. It looks like he was doing the Craig Counsell thing with the Mariners over the last year or two here, and he's already had a second interview with the Guardians. So I think he is going to be a manager pretty quickly. I don't know if it's really hard to say. Like he would be one where if they hired him, I would say I'm intrigued about the hiring. I wouldn't be down on it. I would have questions about the Kapler thing. Whereas with the Vogt thing, I think it would be interesting. We haven't seen him manage, but we do know about how he got along with players and teammates here in Milwaukee, and he was a universally beloved and respected sort of guy. He was very much a father figure to that 2018 squad. And it did good things there. So I would be perfectly okay with that as a hire. That wouldn't bother me from that front. Obviously, I prefer Counsell, and I hope he stays and all of that. But yeah, Vogt is somebody who I think I'd be interested in. But chances are we're grabbing somebody like off the pile here that we've never heard of. Somebody who's in one of these roles. It seems to be the way to get a manager role these days is to be the conduit between the front office and the players, the way that Craig Counsell was doing that before he ascended to the manager role, the way that Vogt did that. That role has been a really prevalent way. In fact, I think Craig Breslow, who was just hired to be the Pobo in Boston, he actually got that job. He had been in that role too. So maybe that was something they were looking to do with their the guy who's running baseball ops was also to relate to the players a little better. I think that somebody who is currently doing that role, I think Carlos Villanueva is currently doing something along those lines.
Just going to say, how about special assistant to the general manager of player development, Carlos Villanueva?
Yeah, that could potentially be it, though. It's a tricky thing, especially for guys who Villanueva can't be 40 yet, right? He's got to be.
He might be there. If he's not, I'll try to pull up his BREF real quick.
Yeah, but for guys who are a little bit on the younger,
39 turns 40 in November. So there you go.
And Vogt's around 40 as well. So guys who are they're past the prime age of being a baseball player by quite a bit, but they're still not old. They're still not
Right.
having that little bit
that far removed from the current player's culture, right?
Well, but I was going to say, like, that did seem to cause some issues for Ollie Marmol this year in St. Louis, right? Where
True.
he seemed to have some problems establishing what he thought was his authority. And apparently they're happy with Ollie Marmol, because if the Cardinals were going to fire Marmol, they would have already done it by now, right? So
yeah, that's weird.
Apparently he's coming back. So
Indeed.
Whatever those early season ruffles must have been smoothed over at this point, because man, there was a lot of noise coming out of that clubhouse in the first couple months of the season there. So yeah, we'll see exactly where this goes, but hopefully we can not have to actually really indulge this conversation in any serious way, because hopefully Craig Counsell just decides to come back, and somebody else gets to hire Stephen Vogt and see if he's the next big thing in managing.
Fingers crossed. We'll see you in the next few days, probably sometime in the next week.
Indeed.
At least have an answer on if he's likely coming back or not. All right, let's kind of shift gears. Other Patreon questions this week. First one we'll get to is Steve DeRozier, who's asking, with the risk of being non-tendered, what are the chances Brandon Woodruff accepts an under-arb contract from the Brewers for 2024, or a multi-year contract for under-arb in 24, and heavily incentive-laden contract for 2025? So kind of an issue I floated maybe a week or two ago when we first heard about Brandon Woodruff's injury. And I should note too, he was actually on the Foul Territory podcast this last week, that pod with a bunch of former players. That's pretty popular. They also stream on YouTube, but he was there. And he said, those conversations about an extension haven't really happened yet, because I guess the year isn't technically quote unquote over. So that kind of makes some sense. But he said he really expressed that he wants to stay a Brewer for a really long time. And it sounded like something he might be open to. So I guess, Paul, let's start with you. Is that something the Brewers should really take a close look at for this situation?
So from the team perspective, what you'd like to get here, because there's just a lot of uncertainty with Woodruff, but you want to, if he can come back and be good, you want him both because people like him and because he is a good pitcher when he's right. If you can get something done incentive laden that makes Woodruff whole, if he can come back and perform and keep him around, that's probably something worth doing on both sides. And honestly, that's probably fairly likely at this point, because it's Woodruff can just kind of sit and wait, and the Brewers can do that, but that has its own problems, and nobody's gonna go in heavily on him, and not that they can anyway right now. There's still time left on that, but he's not going to get a big huge extension from the Brewers right now, and next year he's not going to pitch, so looking ahead, that's not going to be rolling in from other people either. So if you want to get a little bit more upfront with the opportunity to make more later, I could see that being a really attractive way for both sides to go, and I won't be surprised if it happens.
Yeah, so the idea of tendering him, I was actually having this conversation with somebody in some DMs this week. They're not tendering him. That would make no sense. It doesn't make sense really for anybody concerned, because you're tendering him a contract for his last year, which we're 99% certain he's not going to pitch at all.
He's
and
not
if
going
he
to
does,
pitch it. Yeah,
it would be just at the very end.
Like, he seems to think he will, but that's ball player mentality. Oh
Right.
yeah, I'll ramp up in the middle of summer and we'll see what happens in September. But yeah.
Sure. And that's fine for him to keep that in mind. And maybe it even does happen. I shouldn't say 99%. I'm making up numbers here. But like, from the indications we've had, it's extremely unlikely that he's going to be pitching any sort of significant amount in 2024. So it really just doesn't make sense for them to tender him the contract, which would require him to get paid like he's healthy, because the arbitration system doesn't work in a way that makes sense in any logical way. It's not like they're going to know that he's not pitching. No. You're just tendering him a contract and he gets paid based on what he's done. And so he would be making 12 to 14. You had the number last week, James. Like, he'd be making, $12 to $14 million or something a year or for next year, and then be a free agent after that. That's all downside for the Brewers. They're just basically taking money and just throwing it out the window. And so that wouldn't make sense. What happens in these sorts of situations is, when guys are either free agents or close to being free agents like this, is they sign either a 1-year deal with options, team options beyond that, or multi-year deals, like a 2-year deal, a 2-year deal with an option, something like that. And then the player gets to stay with their team and gets to, do their rehab with a training staff and a medical staff they're familiar with. And then the team gets, obviously, like the guy gets some nominal amount of money, maybe a few $1,000,000 for this year. And then the team gets the potential for a discount on the back end of a guy who, if he comes back healthy, is quite a bit better than the money he's making on maybe, I don't know, kind of making up a number here, but like maybe you pay him like $2-3 million for 2024 and maybe $5-6 million for 2025, something like that. And so that gives both the team and him some coverage and some upside, right? It gives them the ability to potentially, if they have to eat their losses on this, it's not a huge loss for the Brewers to eat. And if Woodruff doesn't come back, it's like, he gets this money, but he's also not then locked into some sort of long-term deal where the team is getting some huge discount on him. So I wouldn't expect it to be very long. But tendering is not really an option. I would be stunned if they tendered him a contract. I think this is a thing that once the actual season does end, and that happens, I think it's 24 hours after the World Series or something like that. Like, it's actually in the CBA. Then we will get some clarity on this. And I would be pretty surprised if we didn't hear that Woodruff was signing like, a multi-year deal or something with an option. I think that's where this is headed.
All right, moving on, we've got another one from M. Santana asking regarding Christian Yelich at first base. I know this gets asked a lot, but do y'all think that could happen? I was reviewing Cody Bellinger's first base numbers this season, and he wasn't half bad. I wonder if Yelich could try something similar, which would also help with the outfield logjam, or maybe the Bellinger comparison isn't fair. I will say, if I remember correctly, Bellinger was sort of a first baseman, at least as a prep and coming up through the minors, just happened to also play passable outfield. So that's a little bit different, Ryan, but what do you think about Yelich possibly playing there?
Well, I mean, Yelich was drafted by the Marlins as a first baseman. He was immediately sent to the outfield and never played a professional game. As far as I can tell, never played a professional inning at first base. He was immediately an outfielder, but he was drafted by the Marlins. They sent his card in as a first baseman for whatever reason. So, I mean, it's plausible just from that alone that something like this could happen. I do wonder about like the back issues and the various issues he has. Is that better or worse? If, like, running around in the outfield, is that worse for it than stretching and doing the weird like contortions that first basemen sometimes do? I don't have a good answer to that question, but I do wonder about that. Like, from a health perspective, I think that would be one of the controlling factors here, was they would look at health. The other thing is, this is a weird fit, and it's like it's a current roster weird fit more so than a long-term weird fit, because Yelich doesn't have your prototypical power that you associate with first base. And I think, I don't want to speak for you guys here, but I think the number one thing that they're really going to be looking to do this winter is add some power and try to get some pop in the lineup after that being a problem this year. And one of the main places you can do that is at first base. So moving Yelich to first base, where, he hit 19 home runs this year. And so he had a bounce back power-wise from where he had been. But 19 home runs for a first baseman is not, that's not a big number, right? Like, that's on the low side for that position. And given their needs, I think the fit is a little bit difficult there. But I also then look at the outfield and go, well, where's the room for him in the outfield? Because we have lots of those too, and most of them are center fielders and would be better than Yelich. Did improve in the outfield this year, but it's a weird fit where exactly you put Yelich at this point.
Yeah, it's a maybe. You maybe ask him if he can do it for versatility's sake, and the one thing, he's tall. A lot of other move this guy to first base candidates for the Brewers in the past have had a few major problem after major problem. Chris Davis couldn't do it for whatever reason. Ryan Braun had no interest in it, but also is a short person, and it helps to be tall at first base. Helps a lot to be tall at first base. Yelich is. It seems to have a pretty good glove, generally speaking. Don't know about grounders, but at least catching. So fine, but yeah, it's a temporary solution to the Yelich problem generally, which is his bat doesn't really carry first base. It is, okay for the corner outfield, but it's just okay. And it would be good. It would be good for the team to have him be able to play somewhere else and not just DH. But it's sort of like a minor thing to do. At some point, Yelich will just not be on the team anymore, far, far, far out, and that's where this will end up. But until that point, you're just squeaking him in where he does the least damage as he continues to decline, and hope you get bounce back seasons for a while. And hopefully he does that. But the corner outfield's also where you stick guys like Yelich. So
Right.
The fundamental problem is that Yelich just isn't as good as he's supposed to be, and wherever you can cram him is good. But who knows where he's going to let you.
Yeah, and Ryan, you were talking about adding power to the lineup. DH is also another spot where you could do that, and he occupies that as well. So it does make for a really tricky fit. And I guess if you're taking a skeptical view or a pessimistic view, it's really hard to improve this offense by much if you got to put Yelich in one of those spots, right? It takes up some of that opportunity. So I don't know what Matt Arnold's going to do, but it's maybe worth exploring first base.
Well, that's why the Matt Chapman at third base thing is kind of intriguing, but that's probably a long shot. That's definitely a long shot.
Yeah. All right. Well, on the other end of the spectrum, Jay Google's asking, do the Brewers reset for a year and trade Corbin Burns, maybe Willy Adames, and gear up for the 2025 season? Not that 2024 playoffs are not reachable. Just feel it's a better move to trade Burns now rather than at the break. If they don't move Burns and only get a pick and slot money, would the fans be on board with that? That slot and spot wouldn't help in the immediate future. So, Paul, that's true, but also, we seem to be kind of inching towards maybe just riding it out with Corbin Prince Fielder style.
I think this is actually a little bit tricky because the Brewers are still good enough to contend, and Burns helps you. And any calculus here has to be, is the package you get for Burns worth the hit you take on what can be a contending team next year versus, the significant bump he's going to give you without Woodruff around in keeping that contention going. And this is a tough one because the Brewers are, generally speaking, marginal contenders, and like 2 wins, which Burns gives you much more than 2 wins generally, matters a lot. So I don't know that the average fan would be on board with just letting him walk and getting the walking compensation, because I don't think much of average fans. But I think it's defensible. Like you get another potentially. I mean, if they tank and they're bad despite keeping him, that blows up in your face bad. But the idea behind it, I think, is sound. So it's just a matter of you probably shop him because everybody shops everybody. And if somebody blows the doors off you with an offer, I think you got to do it. But given how the end of the season has transpired and the hit that your pitching staff took, just viewing him as kind of a 1-year rental to keep yourself going for a little bit longer, I think is also reasonable, especially because there is some compensation that comes with it. So, like I said, I don't care what average fans think. I think both sides are viable. I don't think that there's like a stupid thing you can do here. Just a matter of what your package is that you get.
Absolutely. This is coming out of a conversation I was having with Jay in a group chat this week, and basically what I said is you set the bar very high on Burns and you demand a lot in return for him, and you're willing to walk away if you don't get it. I think that's the proper approach to take here. And I think you could probably do the same thing with Willy Adames as well. I think you set the bar high, and if you don't get it, you walk and you just play it out. What we're talking about, to be specific here, if the Brewers were to offer him a qualifying offer, and assuming he hits that threshold, I think it's $50 million. He has to sign a contract for a minimum of $50 million. Which basically the only way would be like catastrophic injury where this wouldn't work, which could happen, but I don't think you necessarily plan on it. you would be looking at him getting something like a pick in the 30 to 32 range. It would be right at the end of the first round before you get to the compensation competitive balance picks. So it would be right at the very end of the first round, and it would be in the $3 million worth of signing bonus range. So you would get an extra $3 million, and you get that extra pick, and you could couple that in then with your extra pick that you're getting presumably next year to be in a Comp B pick. So after the second round, your second round pick, you start really adding up the number of picks you get, and you could start shuffling money around like they have done the last few years, and you could do some really creative things. So it could be really interesting what they decide to do. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. This is 1 year off. So it actually would be this year's going to be a Comp B pick. Next year would be back to a Comp A. So you might actually end up with like a situation where you're picking at like, in the teens or 20 or whatever, depending on where you finish in the standings. And then you have like a pick at like 31 and then a pick at like 36. So you could really start to stack the picks there. Seattle had that this year because of the extra pick they got for Julio Rodriguez. Which I guess, when Jackson Chourio wins Rookie of the Year next year, you could add that into the list as well.
Even another one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another pick.
They're just swimming in slot money.
Yeah, you just have all the slot money, all the picks, and just go hog wild and go crazy that way. But yeah, this is, I think it has to be a fallback position that they're willing to accept, because I don't think you necessarily want to just take what the best offer is, but we'll hold off on that for a sec.
Yeah, I'm just generally in favor of having good players on my team. And yes, I'm biased when it comes to Corbin Burns. He's been a favorite for a long time, and I don't want to see him go. But I do think I agree with you guys. You need to be comfortable in not just trading him just for the sake of trading him. They really do need to make sure that it's at least worth a first round pick quality, right? So that's something to remember as we go into the winter. On the topic of Corbin Burns and possible trades, Bobby or Ulsberg is asking, what are some comps for trading Burns this winter? Struggling to think of other recent examples where a pitcher of his caliber was traded the winter before free agency. And we were just trying to do this, and Paul, we couldn't think of one that was really good.
No, and James went to me first, so I can just say I got nothing here. I'm coming up completely blank. I have no good comps for this, and even one Ryan came up with I'd never heard of or had forgotten about at this point in time. So, yeah, it's almost unprecedented. So it's hard to come up with comps for.
Yeah, so what I've got here is Chris Bassett.
Which is just insane.
Chris Bassett.
Because Corbin Burns is so much better than Chris Bassett. But, well, I guess you could argue he's the best starter on the Mets this year, but still.
He did have like a bounce back year this year after hitting free agency. He actually was with the Mets last year, and this year was Toronto. But he was like a fine like middle of the rotation sort of arm for them. But yeah, like Bassett is kind of the best comp when you're looking strictly at guys who were traded the winter before they were set to become a free agent. I just couldn't find like good pitchers right now who had been in that position lately. Maybe if you go back further than what I was looking at. I have like Luis Castillo and Jordan Montgomery were both traded at the trade deadline the year before. So like they had 1.3 years of control with their teams after they were traded. But that doesn't really work because that's a lot of extra control, especially when you're getting 2 pennant races instead of 1 out of those guys. That's a totally different kettle of fish. And then Pablo Lopez was dealt this last winter, but that was 2 years of control. I mean, he brought back Luis Arias. They had to trade Lopez plus to get Luis Arias. But again, that's 2 years of Pablo Lopez and not just 1. So the comps here are weird. We talked about it last week that like Lucas Giolito just this summer, yes, the Angels who were in basically YOLO mode at the trade deadline, they gave up a top 50 prospect, their only top 50 prospect.
And then they waived him.
And then they waived him to get Lucas Giolito. But I don't think you can necessarily plan on that because, like I said, that was the Angels in, just really sort of nihilistic mode. And it kind of made sense for them to do that just because of the insanity of their situation. But But still, like, I don't think it's so much a useful comp. That's a hard one. So I don't know. We talked last week about the Baltimore thing. That would be ideal. There's a whole bunch of power bats in the Baltimore system that I'd love to get my dirty little paws on. But I mean,
Kobe Mayo, come on down.
yeah, like there are guys. It's not just him, too. Jordan Westberg. There's guys. But yeah, I don't know. To this point, Baltimore has very much resisted trading away from their bevy of prospects, their overabundance of prospects. They've really resisted trading those guys away to make upgrades, especially even to a pitching staff that needed upgrading. So I don't know that we can count on somebody just stepping in and doing that for us. But then again, who knows? Maybe the Dodgers get spurned for Shohei Ohtani, and they decide they want to go and grab Corbin Burns because they think they can sign him to an extension. Who knows? But it's like comps on this one are just tough.
Well, especially as we were kind of just chatting about this before we started recording, like guys of Burns's caliber on playoff contenders just aren't traded.
They're not.
They go to free agency. You ride it out and hope to get as far as you can. So that's why there's not really a comp. All right. Another trade question here. I'm Santana asking, is there an opportunity to sell high on Jefferson Caro since the Brewers have a knack for developing catchers? Or do we have Contreras and Caro for the next several years and be completely set at the catcher or even DH position? So Ryan, prospect guy, just because Jefferson Caro is starting to get ranked highly, do you kind of use that to get something else?
Well, maybe. This is an interesting one, and I think there is something to the idea here, Santana, of the fact that the Brewers have this high competency of being able to turn kind of anybody, it seems, into a good defensive catcher, that really does open up possibilities for them to be able to get value in terms of catching elsewhere. And maybe it isn't ideal that Jefferson Caro projects to be a backup for the next 3 years or whatever, while William Contreras is your starter, right? That maybe isn't ideal. I don't personally have a big problem with it. I think it's fine, especially when you have a DH position that you can shuttle the other one off to a lot when they're not catching. But maybe in this situation, it could make sense for them to say, you know what? If somebody really comes at us with a huge offer for Caro, that they would be willing to listen on that if it fills a need that they have. I could see it. It's a difficult thing. It might end up being a sort of challenge trade. Maybe somebody has a pitcher that has upside, but like maybe that team hasn't figured out quite how to unlock that pitcher's potential. Maybe something in that vein could work for Caro. I don't know. But there's something here potentially, but I think most likely you're looking at a future of Contreras and Caro, splitting time kind of behind the dish, and maybe some first base, maybe some DH for the days when they're not catching, when the other one isn't catching.
Yep, deal from strength if you can, but if you have too many of a player, that's fine. People get hurt a lot in baseball. Having good backups is useful in baseball. But if you're going to deal, you want to deal from the thing you're good at replacing and not from the thing you're bad at replacing. So yeah, it's open, but not a sure thing.
I guess speaking of dealing from a area of strength, Logan Inderdahl asking, what is everyone's appetite for a Devin Williams trade? Awfully tempting considering the likelihood of being good next year, but he seems more important to the Brewers than he would be to any other team. So Paul, I guess, what are your thoughts on maybe exploring a Devin trade this week?
Kind of always okay with dealing your closer. That's so I mean, the Brewers are great at just putting bullpen pieces together. Closer, we've all kind of settled on it's fine, but it still makes people overinflated and more valuable than they actually are. And Devin Williams is awesome. Like it's crazy that they had a Josh Hader and then they got a guy who's pretty much the same as Josh Hader. Like that never happens. And Williams is pretty much his equal. But like we have our pitching lab's good. Our bullpen is almost always staffed with guys who throw 100 now. And if you can get good value back from a team that just values Devin Williams for, the cool pitch and being that super good, that's fine. I would always be willing to deal my closer. I'm just that kind of person. I don't know if they will, but he also, if you do have Counsell and you're doing the normal bullpen management the Brewers have, they leverage him better than pretty much anybody else is going to. And so it's useful either way. Kind of the same answer as the last question. But like generally speaking, deal your closer if you can. If you can get stuff for closer, you should absolutely do it.
Yeah, I'm also with you on this, and it has caused a kerfuffle, we could say, in the last year or two here, where the Brewers dealt a closer on this general principle, and everything exploded in their face. So this could potentially be another one of those cases, but they do seem to have a guy in Abner Uribe. I would bet heavily that in a year or two, Abner Uribe is a shutdown late inning reliever who they can turn to and say, oh, yep, this is our new closer, and it won't really be a problem. I think it's extraordinarily likely as these things ever can be. So they even have like the future closer. It might just be a little bit early from a public relations standpoint. And even from it's always going to be too early from a public relations standpoint to some degree. So that's
right.
That's, no matter when you do it, there's never a good time. But especially just like the Devin Williams thing, the Airbender thing, and the way that like fans really love him. And he has been incredibly, incredibly good. JR always points this out on the Microbrews pod. Like, he is really, really, really good. In a lot of ways, he's really better than Hader and has been better than Hader over his run here. So it can be a tricky thing, and it is one of those things where, yes, again, this is a core competency of the Brewers. They're really, really good at generating and creating relievers, and they can kind of conjure them out of nowhere or from very little quite frequently.
Just look at McGill. Yeah, like right. McGill, you pick him up, and now he's chucking 100, and he could even step in that closer role for a year if Uribe is not ready, right?
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. It could be any one of a number of people.
Yeah.
But PR wise, this is it would be tricky, and so probably not happening. But yeah, I would also be perfectly okay with it too, Paul, especially because in this specific case, I'm just waiting for his elbow to explode and a giant puff of pink mist or something, because like that pitch cannot be.
Go try and throw it sometime if you've never tried to throw an airbender.
Yeah, it's a screwball.
Yeah, it's a screwball. It will shred your elbow. Yeah,
yes, and so you don't necessarily want to be the one holding the hot potato when the timer stops on that. So I don't expect it, but I think there is a good case to be made for it. Before we go on to the next question, too, I remembered something that I wanted to say before about the thing with Burns, and this would also apply to Devin Williams. Don't ever plan on going into a season and trading a guy like, say, Corbin Burns, especially who's in his last year like this, and think, well, we could just go into the season, and if we're out of it, then we can trade him and recoup the value at the deadline. Yeah, that might be a possibility, but more likely than not, the way the Brewers are built, you're going to be contending. And if you do that, you would have to be like putting up a white flag trade. And we've seen how that goes lately. So I have no appetite for that sort of thing. So like, if you're going to trade a guy like Burns or even Williams, if you're planning on doing it in the next, calendar or not calendar year, if you're planning on doing it before the next offseason, you do it this offseason. You don't wait until the middle of the year to do it. Even if maybe the situation could arise where you would do it, don't ever plan on it. You plan on, if you keep Corbin Burns, you're planning on contending with Corbin Burns and going to the end of the year with him. Maybe it doesn't work that way, but the plan here is to go, if you keep him, the plan is to go all the way through with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're terrible at the deadline, then you can still deal him. But I agree, generally speaking, like you should have an idea of what you're going to do. It should be either we're in to contend or we're going to, deal people away, and maybe we'll contend. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just an option that you have if things don't go well. But it shouldn't be like that you don't want the failure mentality there eking into everybody.
Right. Trading Corbin Burns is the glass you break in the case of an emergency situation this year. It's not something you plan on doing going into the year.
Plus, if you do it in the off season, there's still plenty of time for, those feelings to subside a little bit before spring training when everybody comes back all happy and fuzzy feelings, and you have some time too to kind of counteract that with, an extension of somebody else, whether it's Woodruff we talked about or Willie Adames or whatever. Or, you can kind of counterbalance those things and be like, well, on the whole, we're kind of similar. So that, yeah, I'm with you guys. If it doesn't happen this offseason, I say don't plan on it at all. All right. Last few questions this week. Lucroy Suitcase asking, what philosophical differences do you see between David Stearns and Matt Arnold 1 year into his tenure? Are there changes you've noticed? Paul, let's start with you.
I have noticed no changes, and am not plugged into front office philosophy enough to notice such things. So, no, they seem pretty much the same to me so far. Maybe as time goes on, Matt Arnold will develop some tendency or whatever that I actually pick up on. But so far, it just seems like, Brewers situation normal, totally fine. Pitching lab works, offense, and we'll go from there.
Right.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time because this came in relatively early, so I've been thinking about this one for like a day now. And at first I was flummoxed, and then I went to the draft side and I said, well, what do we have this year that was different? And oh yeah, the draft was quite different in that they went after guys who legitimately hit for power in the draft. Some power over hit guys, especially with Brock Wilken, their first round pick, which is something they hadn't been doing for quite a while. We hadn't seen a power over hit guy coming in early in a draft for the Brewers really under David Stearns hardly at all. I guess you can kind of say Corey Ray was, but Ray was more of an all-around guy, and Hero was more of a hit-first guy that they turned into a power hitter after he got here. So that was the first thing I came up with, right, was this idea that they were changing their philosophy in terms of drafting. And then I thought about it more, and I said, well, okay, but this year, in terms of being hit over power, at the big league level, they left a lot of room for guys who were hit over power to come into the lineup in terms of Bryce Terang, in terms of Sal Frelick, in terms of, I think, Garrett Mitchell. They left a lot of room for these guys to get even more playing time than they were than like their positions had in the past. So I don't know. Those things seem to cut against each other, right? Like, and so I think that really is more circumstantial. Those were the best prospects they had, so they're the ones who were getting broken into the big leagues, and that was like a matter of circumstance more than anything, which makes me wonder what we're going to see this winter. I think we're going to get a large clue as to how Matt Arnold likes his hitting from what he does this winter. Is he going to go after guys who are power hitters in a way that like David Stearns really often did? Like David Stearns, if you look throughout the Brewers' history under Stearns, they've, were really more of a power and patience, three true outcome sort of team over a hit for average, hit for you spray the ball around and those sorts of things. Like that was really more their thing. And so we're going to get a clue this winter into what Matt Arnold really believes in, because I don't know if we can really read a whole lot into like what happened last year. I guess you could say that they sent out kind of one-dimensional power guy Hunter Renfroe, and they brought in supposed to be multi-dimensional power guy in Jesse Winker, a guy who was supposed to hit for a little bit more average and take a bunch more walks, and as well as hitting for power, but that completely failed. So I don't know what we can read into like what he did last season in terms of hitting philosophy. So I think we're going to get clarity this year on what he really believes in terms of hitters. I think what his free agent / trade moves this winter, whatever happens there, is going to give us a clue. And I think we're all hoping he leans back and goes for some more power, because they sorely needed it.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, especially in kind of needing more data points, right? It's really tough to judge a GM's philosophy on just a singular offseason, because so much of it kind of depends on what's even available or out there that winter, right? So it's really hard to kind of suss out exactly what type of moves they're going to be known for making, right? And I was going through pitches per plate appearance, and that was a thing as you mentioned, that was very strong still under Stearns. They were number one with a bullet again this year, but they were number one last year as well, and like fifth in 2021. So they've always been super patient. So I don't know if we can point to that, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you're right that it is very early. And the main thing is, more than anything, is we're trying very hard to suss out some maybe small differences. Overall, Paul's right here that they're basically doing what they've done under David Stearns. That just continued for the most part, under Matt Arnold. Like, there really wasn't major changes. We're trying to sort of divine out small differences here and exaggerating the effect of those, when really the correct answer is what Paul said, which is just, they didn't change a whole lot.
Nope.
No. And that was the entire point.
Philosophy.
Exactly. That was the entire point of adding Matt Arnold. They thought the same. So continuity is what they're looking for there. All right. Next, we'll go to Luke Zimmerman, who had a question that we kind of held over from a previous week. It's about the Brewers stadium deal. So Luke's asking, with that stadium funding bill looking more like it will pass the Wisconsin state legislature, how many MLB stadium situations are in question? Are any of these tied to potential relocations or expansion? Related to that, is having 32 MLB teams a realistic possibility? So, Ryan, what do you think on those questions?
Okay, so I did go and check in on a few things. The Vegas thing seems to be proceeding, but it hasn't been finally approved yet from what I can tell. So it seems to be proceeding. They're going to have a stadium downtown on the Strip somewhere. It's going to be small, but I think Oakland is moving to Vegas. It's just a matter of getting all the I's dotted and T's crossed there. It also appears to be that way with the Rays stadium situation, and those had been the two big outstanding things. It was the Rays and it was the A's were the two that everybody had been waiting on. And it looks like the Rays, after all the noise for all these years about how, it's such a hassle to get over to St. Pete. And I'm here to tell you, I've done this now. Amy and I went over there when we were on vacation last year, and it is a pain in the ass to get over that stadium from anywhere that isn't like south. If you're trying to come from the west or anything north at all in Tampa, we went for an afternoon game, and coming out of there, it was gridlock, and we sat in traffic for like an hour and a half. It is a gigantic pain to get over there, and they're going to put the stadium in the parking lot of the Trop because they couldn't get anything else together.
Yep.
Yeah.
So good God Almighty. That was just the only thing they could get going. I was talking to my dad about it, actually. He was asking when we were at the party for my in-laws this week. And I was like, they were talking about Ybor City. And he's like, oh, that'd be great. I'd go over to that because they're just less than an hour down the road in Lakeland. And he's like, yeah, I'd go down to Ybor City to go see baseball. Well, no, it's a trek over. And he's like, they had all their time living there had never made the trip over to St. Pete to see a game because it's a pain in the ass. You can't do it. So the second part of his question, you want to take that, Paul?
Expansion. Realistic? Yes.
Yeah, it's realistic because it is a way for everybody to make more money, and it is a way to extract subsidies from cities where that you can put a baseball team. So it is definitely going to be something that's on the table. It's been discussed ad nauseum. There are places like Nashville and occasionally Portland and some other places that are bandied about for this. So yeah, I think it's actually pretty realistic. I think it'll actually happen sometime in the next decade, would be my guess, probably sooner than that. And where there's money, there will be baseball will do the thing to get themselves money, and expansion is a big one for them.
Yeah, other places that have been mentioned a lot, Charlotte comes up frequently in conversations about this, along with Nashville and Portland. The other one, there's a group putting together a consortium of people to get local business leaders behind the idea of putting a team in Salt Lake City. So
really?
Oh my God. That'd be like playing on the moon. It'd be like Denver.
Yes, it would.
But bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one is something I have heard. But yeah, Paul's 100% right here. We are looking at there's going to be expansion because the fees that the MLB owners could charge right now for an expansion franchise, what do you think? 1.5?
Yeah,
maybe?
something like
Billions.
that.
Yeah.
More than $1 billion. So.
Yeah. And that would be split, evenly between the 30 teams. And MLB owners don't shy away at the possibility of making more money. So it does bring up some interesting realignment things. I would like to see them go to 4 8-team divisions, I should say, and do like a radical realignment and do some really crazy stuff. Stuff I know isn't actually going to happen, but like that's my dream scenario is you go back to something like that where you actually have like an 8-team. That's what it was for the first half of the 20th century, was 2 8-team leagues, and they fought it out for, supremacy that way during the regular season. I know we're not getting rid of all these layers of postseason. I know, but a guy can dream, right?
Indeed.
All right, last question this week, and it's another fun one. I love off-season last questions because of things like this. Morgoth 10 asking, which Milwaukee Brewer is most likely to someday obtain an EGOT, the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony status? So this is going to be tricky, Ryan, because we need to find somebody who can act and who can sing and maybe dance for the Broadway number too. So I don't know. I all I know is Christian Yelich can't even act, so probably not.
Yeah, it's easy to cross guys off the list. The other part is tricky.
Yeah, have you heard anybody on this current team sing at all? I don't recall. But then again, I don't watch a lot of those videos, so I don't know that. Yeah,
I feel like Willie Adames would sing a lot. I don't know if he sings well, but he seems like the jovial kind. Yeah,
he sounds like a ham, like a guy who would be doing that. But whether or not he can actually sing, that's another question. So, yeah, but it really the dividing line here is the singing part of this.
Yeah.
Now, if you wanted somebody from Brewers past throughout the entire history of the organization, this just came to me. Does that open up more options for this?
Sure. I don't think that current day was specified, so go for it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm trying to think. Especially the singing part of this is the part that I'm wondering about, because I mean, you have Euchre, who has a significant amount of acting experience, usually just kind of playing himself, but still, like you have Euchre, so like it's conceivable he could have won some sort of acting award at some point because he actually he has an IMDb page. Okay, so like
totally.
that exists. So. But yeah, I don't know, like the singing part of things, I've never heard him sing a tune, and he's had ample opportunity on the radio to do that. So
I feel like your options are Euchre, the guys who appeared on Days of Our Lives, and that's kind of it.
Jeff Supad, can he sing a tune?
Was Capuano on there?
Capuano was on there.
He's maybe my dark horse pick, an interesting character who. I feel like the acting is there. Who knows about the singing though? Rowdy, for current ones, Rowdy looks like a tenor. That's I guess. All I got there.
Yeah, actually, who Brett Suter? I wonder, because he has the ham, right? He's got that part of things. But he's like most likely to end up in Congress from the Brewers. So
sure,
that seems like more of the way that would go. I don't know that he would end up on the stage, but whatever. Brent Suter is going to do something noteworthy after his career is over. I just don't know if it's going to be in this vein. So
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I can't think of anything either. So if any of you are listening and like yelling suggestions at your radio or your phone right now, just let us know.
Yeah, for home Milwaukee, Terry Cummings, an accomplished saxophone player, probably my pick overall. So, but that's it. Brewers just tough. Haven't seen him do too much on the acting front.
No, that is tricky.
Or singing. Or anything. We know Brett Favre can't win. His acting is terrible. His performance in Something About Mary is atrocious, and so you can cross him off the list. But
yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you for all the questions this week, everybody. A reminder, sign up to become a patron at patreon.com/MKE tailgate to get question priority, both on this pod and on reporting as eligible. I think that'll do it for everything this week. So, we'll see if the Brewers need a new manager by this time next week. And if so, we'll break it all down for you then next time on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Have a good week, everybody.
Fair weather fan, it's not what I am, even though the simple code has changed. I might smile and joy where I'm currently employed. Your soul can't be rearranged. It's hard to
Oh, John Denver.